to speak to the committee, please come to the microphone. Don't see any public communications.
There are none.
All right, we'll move on to interviews.
First up for the Arts Commission, we have Faith Mandrevelis, new appointment with a term to expire April 27, 2028, 228 Whitney Avenue, Manchester, New Hampshire, 03104.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, how are you?
We're humming right along.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Just, familiarizing myself a little bit. All right, well, thank you, Madam Chair. I am introducing Faith Mandrevelis, who I am nominating for the Arts Commission. Faith went to Nashua High School South, right? And North, a little bit of both. She also taught at Nashua High South, taught algebra, and of course grew up in Nashua. She later became an engineer and went to BAE Systems and ultimately taught math for a while, but has become an independent musician and entertainer. And in addition to that, works different jobs. But she, as a performer, is very interested in the art scene in Nashua and is here every day working, and therefore is very interested in being on the Arts Commission. So with that, I will turn it over to Faith, Ms. Mandrevelis, and ask her to tell you a little about herself and a little bit about why she is interested in being on the Arts Commission.
Great. Thank you, Faith.
Hello, I'm just going to stand up because it'll be easier than trying to fight with this desk. I just brought some of my art, all different little mediums like paintings, crochets. I love to paint nature stuff and then kind of like obscure stuff. So I grew up in Nashua and my family still lives in Nashua. And I'm working in Nashua as well. And I, excuse me, grew up and went the very left side minded route. I was an engineer for years and then I was a teacher. And I raised children at the same time. And as I was a child growing up, I saw how much my artistic father found, peace and calming in his art. And my mother had the most beautiful voice, and I remember how happy she was when she would sing. And I remember as I got older, my parents also got older, and they stopped doing a lot of the things that they loved. I had children, focus became on the children, and you kind of start losing the things that bring you passion in adulthood. And you start working in the field, these careers with respectable high earning degrees. And you see that they've lost a lot of their passion. They don't have hobbies. What do? Oh, and they immediately give you their title, and they try to implicate their pay grade. But what are your hobbies? Oh, I don't have hobbies. I don't have time. And then we see increase in pharmaceuticals, increase in mental health issues, and even people that are become adults and they realize that it's so overwhelming, they can't quite figure out how to manage everything, and they have no passion, so it's easy to turn to some sort of drugs or abuse or substance type issue. And then we're seeing mental illness, we're seeing people without homes. And for me, I've always felt and when I talked to my dad recently, or a few years back, I said, you don't even paint anymore. And then he started painting, and his whole just general views started to shift and improve again. And when I left teaching, it was during COVID, and I started working towards my music and working on my art, and I really found myself, and working on my music was really important because I found my voice. You never know really what you sound like until you write your own song. You're not trying to sound like someone. And as a parent, I try to be involved with my children, and I'm involved in also my local community in trying to help bring people together in a safe place to create. And I think it's very important as the gateway city, like this is the gateway to happiness and establishing a good, strong community, a good sense of self. And I think it would be great to have a hand in that type of formulating, bonds, between all the classes, because art is something that is accessible to everybody, and I want the youth to have it. I want the adults to be reminded of the inner child that they are. I want everyone to come together and know that they have a place to express themselves. And I would be honored to have a part in that for my hometown. And so that's me and why I want to be on art commission.
Thank you, Faith. I'm going to take questions from the committee. Alderman Lopez.
So this is the first time in 9 years an artist has actually brought their art.
I know, I
so
wanna
that
see
already
it.
impresses me. And I think a lot of what Faith just said really speaks to what I would like to see the Art Commission reconnecting with. I was very involved with Positive Street Art when it was kind of revitalizing the art scene, and I feel like we didn't come back from COVID exactly the same way with the same resources, and with federal cuts and state cuts to the arts industry, the arts field, I guess. I think we need that organic approach back now more than ever, and we need people with a passion to bring it out. She just reminded me, well, she made me feel at first, like when she said, it's been too long since you painted, that, I haven't really sat down and done a painting since like probably November. And then I remembered I spent a week doing it in Honduras. But it always feels for an artist like it's been too long. You got to get back into it, and you got to share your passion. And I think having somebody with that passion who's very much in touch with it on the Arts Commission is exactly the kind of leadership and inspiration we need. You have my vote.
Alderman Senate?
You know you have my chair.
No questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alderman Lopez really just said it best, but I've been sitting on this committee now for a year and a half change, and that has probably been one of the more passionate presentations that I've seen from a candidate for any board or commission that we have here throughout the city. Definitely appreciate you bringing in the different mediums. And what you had said about utilizing art as a means to connect with your children really resonated with me. I finally got a couple Wednesdays off in a row, so I was able to join my wife and my son at the Arlington Street Community Center, where they've been doing what they present as all ages art lessons, but it's really just sort of an opportunity, like, here's this medium of art, give it a try. And I've never really fancied myself a visual artist, but I made my first pointillism painting over the past couple of weeks, and I'm not entirely disappointed in it, so that's a good thing. And it does, it gives children a sense of worth too. My son has a lot of neurological challenges, and oftentimes self-esteem can be a hurdle for him, and being able to sit down and see something that he's created really gives him that sense of self and that sense of pride. And so I definitely had a lot of appreciation for the things that you say, and just the manner in which the arts of all mediums can bring folks together. I also don't have any questions. I just wanted to reiterate that based on that very brief presentation, but very impassioned presentation, I think you'd be a fantastic addition to the Arts Commission. I'd be very happy to support your nomination.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, I'll echo my colleagues. I'm a huge art fan. My wife and I actually just went to the Harvard Art Museum 2 weekends ago, and she also currently is a math teacher as well. So, but we both enjoy art, and so again, your passion is something that I think we really need here for all the reasons that my colleague said, and I will support you.
I'll just chime in and say a lot of what has been said. Incredibly passionate presentation that you brought. It really resonated with me as well. Especially the part about, as adults, we kind of get away from our art. I write for a living, and I was talking to someone. They said, you told me how passionate you are about writing, but when was the last time you actually wrote something? And I was like, oh, that wasn't a presentation or an email or something like that. Really long time. And it's really important for a lot of the reasons you said, in terms of connecting and letting go, and sometimes being an adult is, doesn't have to be so serious. So I appreciate that. I wish I could see your art from here, but thank you for coming in. Yeah, thank you.
She
Well,
found a circular canvas.
These are embroidery hoops.
Okay, I think we're all set.
I have a question.
Oh, you had a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Did you put your hand where I?
My only question is, what is biomimicry?
So it's two-piece bio, like organic, bioorganisms and stuff, and mimicry, like mimicking it. So it is, I put it on my, are you referring to my resume? And I put, it was an organization I was part of, and when I was in college, my capstone was about it. But, so say for example, there are these flowers that track UVB rays, and so using that type of, like, how are these flowers able to track that, and then apply it to like a solar panel type situation, or just any sort of solar tracking, or like the desert snail, the Namibian snail, like why it doesn't cook in its shell on the desert, and there's a very thin layer between the snail's shell and the surface of the sand, and the way that the whorls are formed, it actually creates this convection, which is cooling, so the snail doesn't cook inside the shell. So using that to build homes in the deserts that are self-cooling just by the structure, not using any electricity or anything like that. Looking at why certain types of ocean life, the calcium stops depositing once the shell is formed, and then using that to help with underwater pipes so that are, calcifying, and why won't it stop, and what's making it so that type of like mimicking what nature's doing. Velcro, like how trains are shaped so that they mimic like a kingfisher bird, I believe. They were watching how it enters the water without splashing. So it's really interesting science. These people are going out and finding just how other organisms are adapting to, like termites, the way they build their homes. It mitigates all of the gases that are built up from the termites themselves, and then applying that to like structures that might have any kind of buildup of any sort of unwanted gas, I suppose. So yeah, it's
Well,
really cool. You should check it out. It's fascinating, like all the stuff that they've been investigating.
Well, thank you for explaining that to me. Thank you.
That was fascinating. Anything else?
I love science also.
I'm gonna think about
This was
snails
the Science
all
Arts
night.
Commission. Build upon it.
Write that down. We don't have a
It's a good
science
idea.
commission.
It's a really interesting idea. I think we're all set. We're gonna interview the rest of them, but thank you again for coming in. And then Alderman Lopez will scoot over.
I'm Alderman Sullivan today.
Oh, you're, okay.
All right.
All right, is that how it works?
Next up for the Cultural Connections, we have Marina Vaz, new appointment, term to expire April 22nd, 2028, 1 Clock Tower Place, Apartment 411, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03060.
Thank you, Madam President, or Madam Chair. This is Marina Cardoso Viana Vaz, and I'm nominating her for the Cultural Connections Committee. Marina grew up in Brazil and is fluent in Portuguese. Started high school in Brazil, but then came to the United States and finished high school at Nashua High. She then went to and graduated from UNH in 2022. She's had various jobs, as you can see from her resume. Most recently, or currently, she's working for the Conservation Law Foundation. She also worked for city government up in Manchester. And she has taken a leadership class from the New Hampshire Leaders Council Institute. So she's been very community involved and would like to get involved on Nashua's Cultural Connections Committee. As you already heard, she lives right close by downtown in Clock Tower, and I believe will be a great addition to the Cultural Connection Committee. And I will now turn it over to Marina to add anything she'd like about herself and tell you about her interest in being on the commission.
Thank you, Mayor Donches. So yeah, I'm Marina. I'm a member of the Brazilian community, and that's part of why I want to join the Cultural Connections Committee. I think it's so important. Is this on? Can
Yeah,
you
you're
guys-
good.
Oh, okay.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
They're very directional.
Okay. I think it's so important that local government has like avenues for folks to know what's going on and to be responsive to local needs. As you may have like seen on my CV, my background prior to working for the organization that I work with now was in local government, and that really, and being an immigrant to the U.S., obviously I have like my lived experience with like, you know, just like getting to know whole new systems and culture and language and things like that. And so I can really empathize with how challenging it can be sometimes to fully integrate and navigate your new community and new surroundings. So yeah, I just think this is a really good opportunity to make sure that we're serving all of our residents and communities here in Nashua. Yeah, I will pause there, but happy to answer. Oh, and one thing I did want to add, sorry. I also currently serve as the environmental justice advocate for Nashua with the Conservation Law Foundation. And yeah, and I am thrilled to be in that position, have had the pleasure of meeting a lot of city staff who are wonderful, working in public health, economic development planning, and I like look forward to keep collaborating with you all to make sure everyone in Nashua has access to a high quality of life.
And if you look at her resume, I should have added this. She was a recipient, Marina was, of the 2020 Edmund J. Miller Award for being the junior UNH student with the highest GPA invited to join Phi Beta Kappa. So obviously a good student.
Great. I will open up to questions from the committee. Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. So my question for you, when you first came here to the U.S., did you come to Nashua or did you settle somewhere else first?
Yeah, so my family relocated to Lebanon, New Hampshire, so Upper Valley region. And later I moved to Seacoast area to go to UNH, and then after that Manchester, and then Nashua.
Okay.
So my relationship to Nashua as a resident is newer. But yeah, I really love the community here. Yeah.
So if
Alderman
I could
Clemmons, yep.
continue, yeah. So I guess my question is, what do you think, based on, and I, you know, based on your limited, I guess, experience, but what do you think is or what is something that you want to bring to the committee to really address, like for the committee to bring up or address or change or, yeah, I'll leave that open-ended. So
Yeah.
what are your priorities, I guess, is the best way to.
Okay. I would say making sure that people feel safe, that people feel that they can access the information they need to make informed decisions for themselves. I can give you a concrete example that relates to that: language access. I think that language barrier is an obstacle in like keeping City Hall and local decision making accessible. I know, for example, the Public Health Department does a wonderful job making sure that language access is embedded in their work, like no top to bottom. And so that is something that I look forward to ensuring that like everyone in Nashua, regardless of their English language abilities, can access that information and feel that they can interact with their aldermen, with, you know, with, yeah, just City Hall and decision making that impacts their lives.
That is great. It'd be something I'd be interested in working on with you and I will support you on the committee. But yeah, I've always said the best part of this country, in my opinion, is that you have freedom of speech, and it's not in any one particular language, or at least it shouldn't be. So, thank you.
Alderman Senate?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for putting your name forward for consideration for this board. Excuse me, I'm still getting used to these. I see from your experience, and you had mentioned it briefly, that you came in November of '23 with the Conservation Law Foundation. If my timeline is right, and it's a little shady, that was maybe right after or right before a significant, what I think you could refer to as an environmental justice issue that had popped up in my neighborhood with the proposal of a asphalt plant on Temple Street. I think actually, if I'm not mistaken, you and I had briefly spoken right after that had been decided and then sent off to the courts, which fortunately it panned out well. But my follow-up question to that, and you had kind of alluded to it in your answer to Alderman Clemmons, but I know one of the big concerns during that time was the issue that you had mentioned, language accessibility for folks in that neighborhood, because it was a very predominantly non-English speaking neighborhood that would have been affected, and there were challenges for folks coming before the planning board, not only being able to convey their concerns, but receive the information. Do you feel that that experience and where we've come since then has made positive inroads, and or do we still have a significant amount of work ahead of us to make that particular board more accessible?
Thank you for that question, and I think your timeline is correct.
Okay.
So I think that the city of Nashua was very, candid in recognizing that that was a need. In that case, I don't know that we have made inroads in terms of changing practices so that we are baking accessibility into our processes versus realizing that a specific project proposal, because of where it's proposed to go, will impact folks who are who are learning English, have limited or no English speaking ability. So I think, I think there's more we could do. I think there's more that we can do to make the process accessible, or processes accessible in general. I think in that specific case, there were measures taken, right, to make sure that it was accessible and that folks could participate. But I am certainly of the opinion that we could do more. And I think that in talking with aldermen and other folks in the community, some of them service providers, the topic of language access really touches a lot of aspects of people's lives. I've heard of people getting a parking ticket, or a situation with related to parking, not understanding what it is, and not being able to resolve the issue because they call the parking department and it's only English speakers. Or in medical settings, I know in medical settings you have to provide translation, I believe. But if you get a letter from your provider all in English, that's not necessarily accessible. So I think there are certain points that we, where accessibility or lack thereof becomes really apparent. But I don't know that we've really baked it into the process, if that makes sense, from start to finish.
No, it absolutely does. I think that's a very fair opinion, and I appreciate the very thorough answer on that. I mean, you touched upon my concerns and then really went above and beyond. I think your background is going to be very well suited to the Cultural Connections Committee. I think you bring a unique background and a work experience, and I'm looking forward to supporting your nomination. Thank you.
Alderman Jettie, then Alderman Lopez.
Thank you. I see on your resume that you have a lot of experience and interest in environmental justice. And, you know, legislation regarding the environment, you know, has been, you know, I think, you know, a few years ago, you know, there was a lot of movement in a positive way, you know, to, for example, limit fossil fuel emissions. But currently, it seems like we're experiencing, you know, somewhat of a pullback on that. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about how environmental justice affects the minority community, whether the minority community is more affected or not by the environment in the laws regarding the environment.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, I think it's undeniable the landscape has changed at the federal and state level. I think, I mean, yeah, like, do I think that people who live in poverty, who are often people of color, who are often immigrants, are affected by not having decision-making processes be accessible to them, not having capacity or time to engage with processes as other folks might, and be adversely impacted by decisions they don't get to be a part of or don't have their perspective considered. Yeah, I think like we absolutely have the capacity to, and in fact have caused disproportionate harm to folks who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, who are low income, which includes white folks. But really the work of environmental justice is to ensure that burdens and benefits associated with decisions that impact our environment, whether that's natural environment or built environment, those are distributed equitably and fairly, so that we are not only one part of our community is benefiting from environmental benefits like clean air, tree canopy cover, access to high quality green space and blue space, so like water, you know, recreational space, and that folks are not burdened by noxious facilities like an asphalt plant or like worse public infrastructure. And we have examples of that in Nashua, right? Like the tree streets in downtown have way fewer streets than other parts of town, like around Greeley Park. You have sidewalks that like are not in great condition, you know, places like East Hollis. So I think there's a lot that can be addressed through the lens of environmental justice, which is really about ensuring everyone has a seat at the table and everyone can benefit and is not being excluded, disregarded, or disproportionately burdened by negative outcomes of decisions that we have to make, right? Because they have to do with our energy generation, with our waste, you know, all of that. So I hope that answered your question a bit. I am happy to clarify anything or if you have any follow-up.
No, thank you very much. I think you answered it very well. Thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
This is Bob, the previous commenter. An example that came to mind for me was the reduction of support for our lead abatement program, which predominantly works in inner city neighborhoods, because we have all the older buildings. So that's where people that are diverse and new to the city end up starting. And so they have to raise their children apparently now in a place where your likelihood of lead paint is higher. There's other examples within our city, like along East Hollis, we want to have a rail trail extension, and that project is probably 10 years in the making at least. It does not get the same urgency as the Riverfront Master Plan or the Performing Arts Center, and that's something we should look at. As are we serving our culturally diverse population while we're celebrating them? And are we making sure that they have authentic access? I know the school board has been struggling over the past year or so with the idea of closing Mount Pleasant specifically, a school that caters to a largely Spanish population that is walking. So even while their budget is ballooning out of control because of transportation costs, that's the building they look at. They're like, all right, it might cost more to bus them everywhere, but that school doesn't have advocacy, people standing up. Well, right now, if you're Hispanic, it's kind of hard to show up in public meetings because there's something of an immigration witch hunt going on. So there's definitely a lot of areas where the Cultural Connections Committee can connect people who have something to say and need to be heard directly with their elected officials. And they can also represent the needs collectively so that individual populations aren't feeling the pressure of, okay, well now you've spoken up, but somebody disagrees, so they're gonna tell you what you're supposed to do and what you're allowed to do. I am already familiar with Marina because I've already met her in the community, very active person. So I will definitely support her nomination. I want to thank you for stepping forward to serve our community in another way, and Mayor Donchis for finding a great candidate.
Okay. I thank you too for coming forward. You're clearly very qualified and embedded in the community. I appreciated your comments around language access. I know of a specific case where there's a lead abatement issue and there's the language barrier. So this is something that we definitely see come up often, and it's an important thing that we can continue to try to improve on. So we'll be taking up your nomination in just a moment. It doesn't look like Mr. Morgan is here.
And do you expect, Madam Chair, that these nominations would come up tomorrow, or do you think it would be in a week or in 2 weeks, or?
Is there an urgent need? I mean, I'm
No,
happy to
no,
give
I'm
an
just-
oral report. I don't
no.
think it's listed as an oral report right now.
I think
Okay.
it's 2 weeks, yeah. I
Oh,
don't think it's
okay,
on the
good. I
agenda.
just wanted to let them know when they might expect to be considered by the whole board.
I did have a question for you before you leave.
Okay.
We have a member going to an alternate on the planning board. Does that leave a space that you're going to have to fill?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right,
Give me
thank you
a
very much.
second, I'll let you know if it's on the agenda or not for tomorrow.
It's not. I checked it already.
Look at you, already ahead of me.
Okay. So we will interview Cole Morgan at another date. Nobody needs to stay for that. Okay, so next we have presentations. We have Director Cummings here this evening. He's going to give us 2 presentations that he's been so patient, and
May I come up and can I ask Jennifer Deshays to join me?
you can. I don't know where the clicker is.
It's probably on his desk.
Yeah. Do you think it's in there?
Yep. Where's your presentation?
It's just minimized.
Oh, okay.
Look at you. When do you get to go up there?
Clerk's PC.
I haven't clerked in so long. Okay.
I already missed
Oh,
it. Just make sure Tom has a copy. Good evening, Madam Chair. My name's Tim Cummings. I'm the Director of Administrative Services. With me this evening is Jennifer Deshays, the city's risk manager. We're here this evening before you because we wanted to just continue the conversation that we've started relative to enhancing our facilities group here in the city and how we manage our capital assets. And so if you recall, I provided a memo to this body a year or so ago. I provided an update in January, an updated memo, which is the reason why I'm here this evening, is to talk about that updated memo that was again presented to you in your, I think it was technically your February subcommittee meeting. I say that in case you want to reference the minutes of that packet, because the communication is in that document. And ultimately, it's this PowerPoint presentation that, before I proceed, I want to take a moment and acknowledge Ross Dugas, who did yeoman's work in putting this presentation together. I think it does a great job in kind of encapsulating the sentiments and the thought process that we have, and want to have a discussion with you all this evening on. And then finally, before I get into the presentation, I handed out earlier, and maybe you, for a good housekeeping measure, want to accept and place on file a communication that was handed to you after the agenda was prepared. That is this document here that I stumbled upon over the weekend, and I thought it was just good supplemental information that talks about how municipalities and government agencies are handling facilities and deferred capital maintenance. A very timely and important topic, especially with the facilities discussion and presentation that we're about to have. So that just is some background information for you. So, with that being said, the city currently has a buildings and grounds department. And what I would recommend to the city of Nashua is we look to enhance our current service offerings. And doing that, I'm suggesting one of the first things that we should endeavor to do is look to maybe change the name to a Department of Facilities and Capital Management. And this whole presentation will go about supporting that thought process. So, mission, I'm not going to read this, but I did want to put it out there that we developed. And before I continue, I should say this whole conversation has been done from the ground up with everyone within the Buildings and Grounds Department currently, and has been a collaborative effort. Ross Dugas, Jennifer Deshays, Jay Honeywell, Amy DeRoche, just to name a few folks who have been working in partnership to help develop this comprehensive conversation. And I say that because they actually developed the name that is being recommended we potentially shift to. They developed the mission and purpose statement, and I very early on provided some guiding principles and some thoughts as to how I thought the direction should go, but otherwise they really took it and moved the ball down the field with the work and presentation that you have before you. So again, I'm not going to read the mission and purpose statement, but it's there for you to reference, and it comes all down to basically making sure we are managing our assets as efficiently as possible. Current portfolio, so on the left-hand side, talks about all the various buildings that are currently maintained and subject to discussion, and we have started these discussions with the fire department, with the library, with the DPW, and some conversations are further along than others, but the idea would be is also to incorporate some of the assets on the right-hand side into what the facilities department would endeavor to maintain. Technically, right now, they do not maintain some of the items on the right-hand side, and what we know is they are in need of support, and we would want to address that over the coming years. Staffing. So currently, it would be organized in a way such as what you're seeing on screen. To be abundantly clear, we are not suggesting any budget changes or additional personnel in FY26. There is a suggestion if we were to start to take on more square footage of maintenance in future years, maybe we would need to add some staff in FY27, but that really needs to be further evaluated. Not suggesting that we're ready to make that recommendation yet, but I did want to flag that as potentially something that we would need to look at doing. But that's subject to more conversation, because I believe there's some efficiencies that we could actually potentially achieve if we took on some of the square footage and reallocated some of the people that we had differently. What do I mean by that? So in the blue, you'll see there's a maintenance supervisor position. That wouldn't be a new addition to the budget. That actually is a current existing position in the library. So I wouldn't want to get rid of that personnel. I'm just suggesting maybe we wouldn't need an operations supervisor and a maintenance supervisor. So before we looked to add any additional staff, I would look to see if we could have a discussion about maybe making sure we're being as efficient as we can with our available resources. Current staffing structure, so this kind of gets into a little bit more on that. And so you can see currently right now what we currently are using, and then highlighted are areas where we may need some additional support if we were to take on some additional square footage. But this assumes that we took on fire, took on library, took on DPW, and that's all still subject to conversation. But what I do know is they are in some need of some enhanced service delivery that I would think might be better achieved if we were to do it in a more centralized way than, you know, one of these individual groups creating their own facilities department. And so here's just a very high level of how we were kind of thinking the jobs would be allocated. So we created a position, and then we created just a high-level description that goes with the corresponding job. Again, I'm not going to read this now. I just really kind of wanted to flag this for you and let you know that we have put a lot of thought into this. One of the items I do want to kind of tease out just for you to kind of see is a property manager position. So we actually already really have that right now. And I would suggest to you, Amy DeRoche has been doing that type of job already. And so maybe it's expanding her portfolio to do a little bit more like management of the tax deeded properties. So right now, we really don't have anyone managing the tax deeded properties. When we do a taking in admin services, we've been hodgepodging it over the last year or two, between the risk office, between buildings and grounds, and between admin services. And once the city acquires the tax deeded property, until it goes back onto the tax rolls in the private sector, there's a time period. Granted, it's not a long time period, hopefully, if we're doing things as efficiently as possible, but there is a period of time where we have to maintain that property. And so we really need someone to be focused on that, and that's just an example of a gap in our current service delivery that we would be looking to tighten up. Again, just some more positions that I wanted to provide some more detail on. And so what are some of the deliverables that we would be looking to institute? And so, you know, there'd be some budgetary savings, there'd be a centralized team for efficiency, trying to create a higher level service, try to create a standardized care for the city's buildings and the way they're managed, developing a work order system, a vendor management system, and then ultimately trying to institute some sustainability measures across the portfolio. These are some of the deliverables we'd be looking for in terms of goals for the future department if we were to do this. And here they are here, spoken in greater detail. So first and foremost, operational efficiencies. Trying to work and build towards cost savings, safety, emergency response, coordination and communication, energy management, and vendor management. You know, by creating a more centralized approach, we would be able to potentially achieve these goals at a greater yield to the city's benefit. And let's talk a little bit about operational efficiencies. So streamlining a process, creating standardized procedures, doing some preventative maintenance, which could help us in the long term. A good example of that would be our handling of HVAC systems across the city. If we could maintain those systems in a similar way at a higher level and then prioritize their fixing and management, we would be able to stretch the life of those systems out, which is a major cost driver in a capital project. Again, I won't go into too much detail, but developing a strategic plan for the assets across the city, I think is a good goal to make sure we're understanding, evaluating the assets in their totality. So there aren't these individual groups developing lists, and then you all are trying to reconcile that list. That puts you in a very difficult position, and really we want to try to do it where we're maximizing the city's dollars and putting them to use as best as possible. And so just for benchmarking purposes, we wanted to kind of take a look at some other communities that are similar to us to just kind of see how they're doing things and where they land, because we obviously want to do everything grounded in metrics and benchmarks.
Wait, go back.
Sure.
I didn't even get to read that.
Yeah, so you know, everything we're doing, we're trying to root it in data to make sure that we're approaching things in a way that is defensible. And so we want to make sure that we understand what we deem as comparable communities that have relatively similar assets as us, and how they deploy their resources. And then next steps. So we're not looking to do anything right away. Again, when I first started talking about this last spring, I kind of teased this out as something that I thought we should endeavor to take on, and then do it in a way that is very mindful of the budget constraints that we have. So if there's still a continued appetite to move in this direction, we would be looking to enhance the conversations with the fire, DPW, and library, which I got to say have been very positive to date. The initial feedback from the groups is very positive. There's a lot more questions that still need to be answered. But ultimately, I don't want to go down a path that there isn't support or interest in doing. So I wanted to kind of come back to you all, give you an update on what we've done to date, and provide you with, telegraphing how I saw the next year or so unfolding, which will continue those conversations. And if we can implement some efficiencies and some operational changes that don't have a budgetary impact, we would look to do that. And then ultimately look to make any type of budget changes in FY27 if they're needed. So that's, again, a very high-level presentation that I wanted to give you to talk about how I would recommend us look at enhancing our buildings and our buildings management.
Alderman Clements?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. So as far as the next steps go, would this be done in-house, or would this require some outside consultant?
Excellent question, if I may, Madam Chair. I would love to vet this with an outside consultant just to make sure we're on the right track. That might take a contract to be able to just bounce this off of them to make sure that we're doing things correctly. But with that being said, I do have a relative degree in confidence in what we're doing. I've spent a lot of time studying this. And so I know that we're going in the right direction, but of course I would welcome any type of expert opinion to ensure that we're doing things correctly.
Alderman Clemens, follow-up?
How much do you think that would cost?
Well, I don't think it would be as expensive as maybe some of the other consulting contracts recently proposed. But I would think, depending on the scope, to answer your question, Alderman Clemens, maybe we wouldn't need a site visit. We could just do this over the telephone, but they would need to look at our current situation, make an assessment, hear the plan that we've developed, and then make some recommendations. I have to believe we could be able to do that for between $10,000 and $25,000. I don't think it would be a big undertaking. I don't think this is a few month type conversation. I think this is a few week type conversation. I think it's just them coming, understanding our current system. Part of the reason why I would do a consultant, if I thought it was necessary, would be to have them as an independent third party to be there for maybe some of the other departments to be able to answer their questions, to make sure that they got independently verified data, so they're just not hearing it from Director Cummings, which there's a value to that. I'm not counting that towards that 10 to 25,000. If we suddenly wanted that person to be here so they could help some of the other departments see this vision, then you're in more of the $50,000 to $100,000 range. But I don't think we need to do that. The feedback that Jennifer Deshays and I have gotten from the departments so far have been positive. They're all interested in this. In fact, Chief Buxton recently mentioned something to me in passing that, he knows that this is coming. He's looking forward to working with us to try to figure this out. I say that because he's coming before the infrastructure committee, he or a member of his team, to talk about the facilities master plan that they've recently undertaken. And we want to kind of make sure we're working together, because at the end of the day, it's one pot of money.
All set,
Yep,
Alderman
thank you.
Clemmons? Alderman Lopez, then Alderman Jettie.
In the facilities that you looked at, there's nothing really mentioned from the school district?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So this would have nothing to do with the school district. This would solely be general government only. I will say the school district is much further ahead than the city of Nashua is in terms of managing their assets.
It's because they have Sean. But I was asking about where we intersect, like who is running Stellos? Have we made a contract to figure that out? And would this having to do with that?
So if I may, Madam Chair, this has nothing to do with that, and I want to be really clear about this. This is only talking about the management of vertical infrastructure, so that would be buildings only. And so one of the reasons why I want to move away from our current department name is Buildings and Grounds. That's a little bit of a misnomer. We do not want to, nor should we be taking care of Stellos Field. That needs to be handled either by the DPW or by the schools, but the group would not have the expertise or the equipment to be able to actually manage the field.
Right. Well, I figured that would be a Department of Public Works thing, but it has buildings there too.
So, and those buildings wouldn't be managed in the same way that like you would manage an office building. Those would be more of grounds, like institutional type uses to support the
Okay, so
field.
you're really just thinking about people spaces.
Yeah, really just people spaces, that's right. A lot of it is just people spaces. And I will say, one of the biggest difference between the schools, and I will put it out there, this is a little bit of a medium type step. In the ideal scenario, a lot of municipalities are going towards a centralized school and general government consolidated facilities department. That is not a new idea. I'm not recommending that at this time, but I will point out there would be a lot of savings that you could achieve because, yes, the schools do have Sean Smith, and he's a wonderful asset to the department, but they also have trades in the house as well, which the city does not. And so if we could utilize an in-house plumber, electrician, carpenter, for general government assets, then we wouldn't need to outsource it. I could tell you right now, we could achieve a savings. Now, with that being said, I am sure they're stretched thin as well. So I'm not sure that they could take on much more work, and that would be a much more robust conversation. I would like us to take what I would consider more of an intermediate step with this, and then maybe later on down the road, in a few years, whatever it may be, you could have that conversation.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
One last question, I guess. What does O'Keefe stand count as?
I'm sorry?
What does Keefe count as?
That would be the Elm Street Middle School, and that would fall under that's under admin services right now.
Okay. I will try not to think of more buildings.
No, great question.
Well, I had Holman written down.
Yep, and that would be under DPW.
Okay.
Yep, that's more citywide infrastructure that has to do with, fields and park and rec, and they really would be maintaining their infrastructure like parks.
Okay. Alderman Jettie, did I have you next?
Yes, thank you. So I love the idea of, centralizing things. It just makes common sense to me that, that we would have, one department that would, have the expertise required to maintain things as opposed to having, separate, it just seems more efficient. But, I remember when I was liaison to the Board of Public Works, one of the Public Works Commissioners was questioning how the aldermen could possibly be making decisions about, the downtown barriers, because the Board of Public Works is in charge of streets and sidewalks. Where did we get the audacity to think that we could control things like that? And it made me think of, as you're talking, I'm thinking, the Board of Public Works, they have certain limited jurisdiction that they don't want to let go of. The fire commissioners probably feel somewhat the same way. The library trustees. So I'm thinking, no matter what they think, I think that it makes sense to centralize these things. But I'm wondering, would we have to undergo some changes to the charter to make it clear that we have that authority?
Director Cummings?
I'll double check to get legal's opinion on that. I'd like to think we don't. I think we could, through ordinance, make some of these changes. Also, I think some of the departments recognize the need for this and are welcoming it, and they know that they are stewards of a city asset. Ultimately, that's the system that we have, where it's in the care, custody, and control of the individual board for a time, but then it reverts back to the municipal corporation, which ultimately tends to be the administrative services division, hence Elm Street Middle School. So I'd like to believe that we would all work cooperatively together to do that on behalf of the city. I think it's in the best interest of doing that, but Alderman Jettie, your point is very well taken. It's one of the reasons why I'm going really slow with this. Because I could envision one of the boards pushing back and saying no. I could see some of first I thought it was going to be some of the department heads. I will say I was very pleasantly surprised that department heads have been very receptive to this, but absolutely some of the elected or the appointed officials may have some concerns, but I think those concerns could be addressed. And it will come with time and trust and communication and transparency and all things I'm committed to doing to work through some of those issues. One of the biggest issues that we got faced with is if we were to do this, how do we know that our roof, as an example, won't be left behind? Well, the answer is because we're not going to look at something and say, well, we're going to look at your roof differently than all the other roofs. But what we need to do is look at all the roofs together in their totality and see how best we can do it to be, one, efficient, and two, to provide our limited resources to the roof that needs it the most. Let that data drive the conversation. And if we're communicating proactively and being transparent and explaining the analysis and working cooperatively with everyone, I'd like to believe they would see and understand that logic.
And,
Alderman Jay?
yeah, if I could, a couple of minor things. You talked about tax deeded property. And with tax deeded property, do we do anything other than maintain that we're not leasing out tax deeded property or anything like that? Are we, or are we? I don't know.
So great question, if I may, Madam Chair. So I'd like to say we wouldn't endeavor to lease that out unless there was a unique situation, but we are having some tax deeded property with current tenants in there. And we need to be, and then as the owner of record, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are taking care of that asset and being responsive to that tenant. And I think we have a legal and moral obligation to do that. And so, and we are very much in that situation right now.
And one last thing on your visual thing, it struck me when you had the towns, you had Nashua, Lowell, and Lowell listed only 3 buildings. Is that, can that be true?
We verified it, I believe it is true. Ross Dugas put that slide together. I think particularly it's because some of the buildings that they maintain, not counting some of the schools, they have some other third parties, like the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. It's a third-party contract, so they're not necessarily maintaining that asset. And so I think they have a couple unique situations like that. So their centralized buildings is relatively minor. You know, it's, 20-ish thousand square feet per employee is really all that's being maintained. I think that's a fascinating statistic. I feel badly for Fall River, where, you have one employee trying to maintain about 100,000 square feet. That's a lot. That's a lot.
How about Norwalk, Connecticut, maintaining 3 buildings with 0 people?
Exactly, and they outsource that. So it's pretty interesting, and we're finding a wide array here of what municipalities are doing, and a lot of municipalities are just starting now to kind of have this conversation as well. I think we're a little bit further along than Lowell, and I think Norwalk is much further along than us. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. Maybe I missed it, or maybe it's just short-sightedness on my part. I noticed in the list of stakeholders, and I believe in your chart of buildings that would ultimately fall under the purview of this new department, unless I missed it, I didn't see police.
Correct. So police is where it would take a charter change, I believe.
Okay.
And they already have their own facilities department.
All right.
And they already have a facilities manager. They already have a very comprehensive facilities group that only maintains that one asset.
So that's internal infrastructure that they have in place that maybe somebody like the fire department doesn't have then?
That's correct. That's correct. Fire department doesn't have. Library does to a degree. Library has a couple positions, and they, maintain their building. And then DPW outsources, but doesn't really do anything internally. But they obviously they have assets as well.
My follow-up was just going to be on the subject of Department of Public Works. I saw that you had brought the new central building under the purview of this, sort of as the new building down at the Fort Hills landfill. How do you make the distinction when you're looking at a department like DPW of saying, well, we'll bring in the administrative building, but not say like the office space and the lab space over at the wastewater treatment plant, something like that? Or did I miss it?
Nope. Excellent question.
I did miss it.
Yeah, no, excellent question. So it's really in terms of like thinking of the service, and I'm going to be very high level here, as building maintenance, and so just maintenance, and then custodial services. So those two services are very distinct and unique. And I think what we know is the custodial demands on the DPW admin building, we absolutely could handle. I think there's a maintenance component that we can handle. I think when it starts to transition to wastewater, because really the building itself it's sort of like Holman, I think we could absolutely, if there was an appetite, handle the custodial. But I wouldn't suggest that this group would have the knowledge, equipment to be able to maintain the wastewater plant. Because that's actually, you have people hired to do that. That's their job, is to maintain the plant. We could absolutely, if there's an appetite, do the custodial side of things for them. No problem.
Well, nobody knows wastewater better than David Boucher, so.
Exactly. So we wouldn't want to get in their way.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why.
Okay. No, that answers my question. Thank you.
Alderman Clements?
Yeah, so in regards to the actual staff themselves, are any of these positions currently in a union? Are they union positions?
Yes.
So that would have to be a large part of this, because you would have to have negotiations, correct, to, like, for example, if you're gonna move, and I don't know where these positions are, but if you had somebody who was contracted to work in the library, right, but you want them to expand that footprint, then that's gonna require negotiations, and, so has that been thought out?
If I may.
Director Cummings?
It has absolutely been thought out, but we haven't endeavored to go that far. Because frankly, I want to make sure we have an interest, a buy-in, to want to have that conversation. But that's the next point that we're at, is to really engage at that level. I would like to represent to everyone right here that we are not looking at this to try to lay anyone off. We're not trying to figure out a way to be so efficient that we would be suggesting just the opposite, actually. I think in full candor and disclosure, there's probably more of a conversation of, when there's an appetite to add personnel, we're going to be looking to add personnel. So I say that too, because when I say the word efficiencies, I don't want anyone to jump to the idea right away that I'm talking about laying people off or trying to streamline personnel. When I say efficiencies, I'm talking about trying to get getting one RFP issued for an HVAC consultant to come in and work across our system, because they can give us the cheapest price when they are managing our entire systems, as opposed to the 5 or 6 vendors that we're working with. And they all charge us a premium because we're not maximizing economies of scales. When I say efficiencies, that's what I mean by that word efficiency. I think there's probably going to be more like a conversation with the various collective bargaining units about, we have this person identified, their job description is narrow. We're going to be looking to assimilate them more into this group over here, and that is a little bit wider of a job description. And what does that look like? Is that person underpaid per se compared to the other ones? And if that's the case, I think we need to pay everyone fairly. It's going to be that type of conversation.
Alderman Clemens?
Okay, it'll be interesting to see. That'll be interesting to see how that goes, because that could derail the entire thing if you have, folks who quite frankly don't want to participate, I guess. But I would say that it's a good conversation to have, because I agree that I think having this under one umbrella would be a good move. The only other thing I will say is, I think I agree that these types of services are always better to have in-house, as opposed to contracting out some, a service to do it, because you don't get the buy-in, you don't get the pride that comes with ownership of that being your building or your job, like we have, like, for example, in the school department now, or even with some of these folks who do this now in some of our buildings, because they know the ins and outs, they know who works there, they know what the issues are, they know where to go. They could probably give you a list of what the maintenance issues are right now off the top of their head if they were here in front of us. So that, you're not going to get that when you outsource. So I think this is the absolute right approach, is keeping everything in-house. And I would encourage you to continue the conversations.
Thank you. So I'll try. I guess I'll just conclude with I'll try. I mean, we're just, this is an ongoing conversation. We'll do the best that we can and, and see where we land.
I've got lots to say, so I always love being last. So I'm sure comes as a surprise to nobody that I am supportive of this idea. I've been asking for us to be looking at our portfolio and deferred maintenance and trying to get ahead of infrastructure issues before they become an emergency. So I think this is a step in the right direction. I think I'm more of a step 5 person, Because I've seen what you're talking about from in terms of efficiencies. On the Energy Environment Committee, we wanted to do an energy audit, but we could only do the ones that were under our purview. And if we'd been able to open it up to the school buildings or the police, like that, some of our biggest assets are in the school. And I hear all the intricacies of, we don't want to step on, someone's toes who's been doing it. I really hear that you're listening and understand that there are expertise there. But I do also have this constant worry of like, we don't hear about it until it's in front of us because there's an emergency. And then we're the ones who have to be the voice for the taxpayers about, okay, well, we're investing this much money in this school or the sewer or whatever it is that has an issue. So I like the idea of having a more centralized place to be looking at that consistently and trying to do better. Because ultimately, we shouldn't have a deferred maintenance list. We should be on top of that. And our biggest assets as a city are these buildings. So it's really important. And wastewater is one of the best ones. And I know we don't do this, and it's not under here, but I can tell you of the facilities managers who've been in front of us, and we've invested the most amount of money, it's been in our wastewater over my last 8 years that I can remember. So I think it's really important, and I appreciate you and applaud you for all the work that you're doing. I have a short list of things that I have questions on. You do not have to answer them now. I just like next time you're ahead of us. Things that were on my mind, already asked, police, school, whether or not that would work. Union was already asked. I would like to know what the budget, would fire, school, whatever, if they came under us, would that mean that their maintenance budgets would come down? I think you are very optimistic. I loved your wish list, but I see that that's going to create more staff to get that wish list actually done. So just want to make sure we're being realistic about that. And that was it, I think. As the last speaker, most people have gotten to my thoughts, so thank you.
I'll come back to you with some more detailed answers. A lot of them I think have been addressed. I think the budgetary one is worth more study. I agree with you. I think I'm being a little optimistic. But what I believe, in full disclosure, is when the Elm Street Middle School sells, what I would recommend is we take some of that money that we're carrying and then we repurpose it within that department's budget, so it wouldn't be a budgetary impact per se. But we in theory wouldn't need to be maintaining that building once we sell it because it'll be in private sector's hands, but we would have been budgeting for it. And so I'm hoping for a little bit more of a budget neutral type of approach here because I'm not trying to make an impact on the budget as much as possible, but it is absolutely something worth studying. I just wanted to kind of give you some visibility into my thought process as I've spent time thinking this through as to how I might address some of these issues.
Since you brought it up, I want to ask this question just so it's on top of your head. I know this week is the hearings about the two Elm Street proposals. I'd like to hear your thoughts, not now, it doesn't have to be now, on I think one caps it and hands it back to us, and maybe what would the maintenance and all of that look like for based on which proposal we choose would be interesting.
I'd be happy to have that conversation on another night. I think this body and the Board of Aldermen need to kind of understand that.
Okay.
But since it did come up, I do want to note for the record that we have both Portuguese and Spanish interpreters joining us for the community session on Thursday and Saturday. So
Can you repeat for the record what times and where those are for everyone?
so I'm gonna say it is here on Thursday night, 5:30, and then Saturday at 1 p.m., where both development groups will be meeting with the general public at large, making their presentation about what their vision is, and ultimately available to answer any questions that may arise.
Point of clarification, you said here, not the
Big
Alderman Chamber
auditorium.
though, right? The
Here, City Hall, yes.
auditorium.
Yep,
Okay.
the auditorium.
No.
I'm not trying to hear from half of my neighbors on that. It's the auditorium.
And we have Spanish and Portuguese interpreters there. And if I can, I'm still trying to get a sign language person, but haven't been able to do that yet.
Great. Looking forward to it. Other questions from the committee before we let Director Cummings? Are you staying for the second one?
I am. I'm saying for the second one, it would be actually Jennifer Deshays to go, and if we could call up the Human Resources team.
Okay, moving on to, what is the second presentation? Is it on here too?
Yes, it is. It is the compensation study for unaffiliated employees.
Is there a separate PowerPoint?
No PowerPoint for this. This is just really just a very high-level briefing.
Okay, great.
All right, so as we transition to the communication that I submitted back in January, this is just to make sure everyone has the document in hand that went with the communication. Joining me to my right is Nancy Trask and Lizzie GOV of the Human Resources Department. The reason why we're here this evening is our consultant finished the unaffiliated compensation study and made some recommendations based on the work that they did. And so this has been submitted to you in January. We wanted to just come before you if you had any questions, answer any of those questions, tease out maybe in a little bit more detail as to the direction you'd like to see go. Ultimately, the next step in this is filing an ordinance to update the compensation plan for the unaffiliated employees. And what I'm trying to do is try to do that in a way that will minimize any real major changes once the ordinance is filed, to try to have as clean of a document as possible. So with that being said, just to remind folks, over the last 9 months or so, the city endeavored to update our unaffiliated employee compensation. We undertook a very detailed study through a management consultant called MGT, and they have a very refined methodology in which they do this. We executed on that methodology. They have developed the report that was filed before you in January, and is, again, for reference, is in your February meeting packet. And ultimately, it comes down to a recommendation from them that we look at instituting a compensation plan at the 70th percentile. And I leave that to you all as to whether that's the appropriate number. We heard anything from 50 to 80%, as so 50, 60, 70, 80%. Ultimately, the consultant recommended 70% after the conversations she's had with not just you, but various stakeholders. I'll leave my comments there. There are other recommendations that if you want, we could get into, but really just wanted to kind of point out that the compensation study would be based on a 70th percentile pay philosophy, and then a 9-step type plan with grades from, I'm doing this from memory, but I think it's grades 6 through grades 25 or thereabouts.
11 to
11 through 25, thank you.
When did this come out, so I can
I
find it?
just found it. It's on
February?
it's attached to the February 3rd agenda.
Yep, it's the February 3rd agenda. You would have been part of, I believe, the agenda packet.
Okay.
Can have Donna attach in the future when we're talking about something. Okay, so is the rest of your team going to speak, or are we open to questions at this point?
I'll hand it off to them in case they want to add any details.
No, we can do questions. Yeah. I think that's-
We're all trying to find the compensation study to remind ourselves. I mean, I guess I'll ask the elephant in the room question. You guys did this in January. We've had a lot of fiscal constraints come down, and a very tight budget allocation that was put out to the city, as well as state budgets and federal budgets that are going to affect our day-to-day. So how confident are you in this plan, given that environment, and what adjustments might we need to make based on some of that?
so I'm gonna take it first. That is a great question, and one that I really wanna have with you all, because I think it would be fair to say that to some degree, we're hearing conflicting messages. We're hearing that you'd like a pay compensation level that's higher than maybe some of our peers because we want to pay our employees. But then given guidance more recently of like a 3% operating budget, the two don't correlate. And so we're going to need to reconcile that to ensure that we are acting in a very deliberative manner. What inevitably will happen is if we set the guideline year over year too low and we can't afford basically what we're obligated to within our ordinance, then other non-salary items will start to get pulled back, and that's where one of the deferred maintenance list comes from, as an example. So it's inevitable that what you'll see is departments will start to not spend in those areas to be able to adjust for areas where they're just following the contract, if you will, and that's typically what we hear from time to time.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, Alderman Kelly, where this was again?
Sure.
I cannot find it.
Absolutely. I can actually send it to you if you like. I found it on the agenda. Here, I'll just send to you.
It's the February 3rd
February
meeting.
3rd. If you go to the agenda packet from February 3rd, it's in there.
February 3rd?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, can you like text me
Yeah.
that? Or that'd be great.
You got it. It's right there. Got you. Alderman Gavay, do you want to join us? Okay. All right.
He's got some tough questions for a certain individual.
I did not get it, but that's okay.
I'll try. I'll email it to you. Alderman Judge, do you have a question in the meantime?
Are you recognizing me?
I was recognizing
Okay.
you.
So, I'm having trouble because I didn't, shame on me, I didn't realize that we were going to be dealing with this tonight. And so I'm, just like Alderman Clemmons, I just found this and I'm,
I thought we were having a presentation, because that's what it said on the
Mm-hmm.
agenda.
yeah, so I'm scrolling through this, but, let me ask you a question. When we had the presentation before, I think I remembered saying to you, pointing out that, that when you give a 3% increase, like, a union, several of the unions have come in and have, if I recall correctly, around the 3% area. But when you apply that, 3%, somebody that's making $100,000 is less than someone that's making $150,000. The increase is disproportionate and not necessarily appropriate. And so did your consultant just throw a percentage at these numbers, or did they make distinctions at the different levels?
If I may, Madam Chair. They made distinctions at the different levels based on job and a whole other various group of variables.
Based on what?
The job. Based on the position and the job itself, they have what's called the gradation is different between each grade. I'm going to say off the top of my head, 5% at the base salary is what the difference is. But to be in those various positions, you were evaluated, and I think, there was about 9 variables that were evaluated, and based off of where you fell, that's the grade that you were placed in.
Do you have a follow-up, Alderman Jenny? Did you get it, Alderman Clemmons?
No, and I'm frustrated by that, because we were supposed to have, or at least the agenda said that we were going to have a presentation. I would have brought this had I thought I needed it. So I guess my only thing is I'd be happy to discuss it again, but I can't discuss it tonight.
Alderman Senate.
Just a mild follow-up to that, and then I guess a question, just to have one. I was able to find this, just to refresh my very clearly short-term memory here tonight. You had said the consultant is making a recommendation based upon the 70th percentile?
Correct.
Is that correct? All right. On a follow-up to that, we are expecting the budget tomorrow night. Is that implementation contemplated in this year's budget, or is that next year?
Or if at all, ever.
If at all ever. So if I understand this correctly, we would have to approve this at the board level before being able to implement it. Okay. I mean, that makes sense to me. I do share my colleagues' frustration. It's a lot of information to come in here tonight and just say, well, refer back to February 3rd. Bully on me for not doing my homework, I guess. But I too was under the understanding that this would be a presentation, and I guess maybe with a selected proposal, maybe a deeper dive into a lot of the numbers that we're looking at here and what the implications of those numbers would be. So that's certainly a conversation that I would like to have as well. I just don't see how we can right now in this scenario.
Agree. If I may, Madam Chair.
That was, yep, go ahead. Dr.
So
Cummings.
there is no time sensitivity here. This is a continuing, evolving conversation. I would suggest if we were to file any type of ordinance, it wouldn't be until the summertime anyway at the earliest. I would want you to get through the budget season before we actually took this on. Ultimately, if we wanted to do something, we would have to change the ordinance before we start the next budget season for FY27. And that would be the goal. So we could table this until the summertime, and then come back and have this conversation again, and then see what the pleasure may be for the filing of an ordinance if we want to file anything at all. And that is something that we probably need to discuss. I just wanted to not lose track of it because this was on the agenda, and I know you've had some busy meetings. So obviously that's why I was here this evening, really just to kind of keep the conversation going, and at whatever manner you'd like.
Alderman Lopez.
Just to keep the conversation going on my end, could you just sort of send me the presentation too?
I'll make sure that Donna sends it to everybody. I found it, but I'll make sure that we all get it before the next meeting so you can
I
review
think
it.
that exact aldermanic meeting was one that some of us had trouble getting the minutes for ahead of time. Because I found a reference from another alderman who said like, I'm having trouble seeing the minutes, so I think that was just a
switch
bad.
from the old format to the new
Yeah, it
format.
might be because of the agenda sender adjustment, but what I'm hearing is a consensus from this board that we want to have time to sit with the study and also get through budget season. But I think that there were some valid questions that were put out, so if you guys could come back the next time with some of those things, top of mind, at least especially as we get through the budget season, what that might implicate for, the next budget season, and if it ends up being as tight as it was this year, what does that mean?
Thank you.
So, everybody else set? Oh, Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, so since you're here, can you tell us, so when we get to do our jobs and look at this carefully, was there, like when you talk about the 70th percentile, that's, if I remember correctly, that's looking at surrounding, somebody picked comparable municipalities to compare us to, and the 70 percentile, is, based on those other communities, what those other communities are paying employees in similar positions. And in order to be competitive with those, I guess if we wanted to pick the best of the best, we want to be at the 100th percentile. And so, we're stepping back to the 70th percentile. Does that translate into a percentage increase on what we're paying people now? Do you know what that number is?
If I may.
Dr. Cummings?
Yes. What you described is essentially what it is there was comparable communities developed. There was 9 of them or thereabouts. Maybe more. I'm looking at the list right now. Brockton, Mass, Brookline, Mass, Concord, New Hampshire, Cranston, Rhode Island, Fall River, Mass, Framingham, Mass, Lowell, Mass, Manchester, New Hampshire, Newton, Mass, Norwalk, Connecticut, Portland, Maine, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Quincy, Mass, Somerville, Mass, Waltham, Mass, and Warwick, Rhode Island. So based on that comp set, basically you use that to develop your median, your 50th percentile, and then the 70th would essentially be, 20% higher than that comp, than that 50th percentile. With the argument being that you want to pay a little bit more than average, than the median, for various, whatever your compensation philosophy is for the various reasons. You want to attract a better, stronger talent. You want to retain that talent, whatever. Again, whatever that case may be. So that's essentially the background behind the development of the 70th percentile. I would have to do the calculation again, but off the top of my head, I'm going to say to implement this on the in FY26. I'm sorry, in FY25. To implement this in FY25, we were going to need about $500,000 approximately. Does that sound?
FY '26.
What's that?
For FY '26.
For FY26, we would need about $500,000.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
So, when we did
But,
the calculation.
So my question is, does that translate to a 3% increase on what people are making now, or 4%, 5%, 7%?
I don't know. We would have to look at that. We didn't look at it. We did it just in the aggregate to see what it would cost to implement. I don't know what it would cost on the individual.
Okay.
It will vary anywhere from a 4% to, whatever it may be. Anywhere between a 4 and I'll say 6 or 7% increase year over year is what it would be.
Okay. So I'm thinking, I feel that people ought to be paid what they're worth and what they need to live in an appropriate manner for given their education and their expertise and their skills. On the other hand, I'm aware of the fact that if that meant that we have to raise our non-affiliated employees by 5%, let's say, then I'm expecting our union, people negotiating on behalf of the unions would be looking for a similar increase, which may be appropriate. But I'm looking at, the difficult situation that we're all familiar with, that we're being put in, by the federal government, by the state government, where, the money that we are spending locally is more and more, we have to raise that from our local property taxpayers as opposed to getting help from the federal government or the state government as we have in the past. And so, that I know you're struggling very much with that dilemma yourself, and but we're struggling with it too, and it's not. This is becoming a more difficult and less pleasant job. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll pick this back up in the summer, it sounds like.
Whatever your pleasure is, whatever you'd like.
We'll stay close on it. We'll find a time. Thank you for being here.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Applications to license hawkers, peddlers itinerant vendor's license.
There are none.
Appointments by the mayor.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the new appointment of Faith Mandravelis to the Arts Commission with a term to expire April 27, 2028. To recommend the reappointment of William M. Grady to the Board of Registrars with a term to expire May 1, 2028. To recommend the reappointment of Sandra Pratt with a term to expire March 1, 2028. And new appointment of Marina Vaz with a term to expire April 22, 2028, both to the Cultural Connections Committee. And to recommend the reappointment of Robert Bollinger with a term to expire March 31, 2028. And appoint from member to alternate Scott Leclerc with a term to expire April 22, 2028, both to the Planning Board.
You've heard the motion. I have some discussion. I asked the question to the mayor about moving that member from member to alternate. He said that was gonna leave an opening. So I'm a little bit unsure about that. I don't know if that's gonna leave us with not enough people for planning board things that are coming up. But maybe someone else might know more. I do not attend planning board meetings.
Well, we can't make him stay if he wants to.
Well, but
doesn't
I
want-
wanna know how quickly we're gonna fill the spot. Are we gonna end up, you
Yeah,
know,
but
why don't we have an appointment yet? Go ahead, Alderman
He
Clements.
would still be an alternate though, right? So he would go if they didn't have.
So he could stay an alternate until
Right.
then. Okay,
Could
all right,
maintain
all
quorum.
right,
Mhm.
all right. Okay, you've heard the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, new business resolutions,
There are none.
new business ordinances.
We have O-25-053, updating the taxi licensing ordinances. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
All right, the motion is to recommend final passage. Alderman GOV, are you just here for fun, or are you here for this specific ordinance?
I'm here for my tabled ordinance.
Oh, you're table orders. Okay, thank you. I know that City Clerk Healy has joined us to speak on this. Do you want to come up?
So for the record, Dan Healy, City Clerk. So I'm here to speak on O-25-053. This is updating the taxi ordinances. These are some changes that I had recommended going through the full ordinance on taxis. Now that I've been here a few years, I understand the process a lot better. What I did was I had our ordinance side by side with Manchester, and I also looked at Concord just to make some updates. The first one, very minor. We have a few taxi companies where there's a few representatives from the company that come in and they discuss things with us. Currently, we only require the owner of the company to do a background check. What I'm looking for is anyone that has interest. If they have interest in the company, we want them on the application, and we'd like a background check for them. That's the first change. The second change that I have is the annual fee for a vehicle taxi cab license. We currently have it $75. I'm looking to up that to $100. But with that, I'm also looking to put in a proration, so the fee amount goes down as the year goes on. So if they get a car in the middle of the year, the rate does go down 75%, 50%, 25%. That is what Manchester does, and I also want to make note that Manchester charges for the first few cars that they have. If you have up to 10 vehicles, they charge $400 per vehicle. So I know this is an increase of $25, but I'm also requesting that a proration goes in to then start to bring that price down. And another change that I'd like to see added is that if the taxi company switches out a car during the year, if they replace one car with another car, we just charge the $10. Currently, we would charge the full price, the $75, even if they're swapping a plate. So that's not in our ordinance currently, but that's what I'm looking for, is to add, if there's any transfer during the year, just to make it the $10. Next, the annual fee for a taxi cab driver's license. Currently, it's $50. I'd like to raise it to $80, and the reasoning behind this is that we are charged around $78 for the drug test. So right now, the city's losing money on applications. We're not looking to really profit off of the taxi cab licenses, but just for the city to be at least breaking even on these licenses. And I want to say right now, Manchester is $80 and Concord is $75. So I don't think it's too much of a jump in price, and that's again just to cover our cost for the drug tests. Additionally, we have some drivers that are issued licenses. Every quarter, our software, we have a random selection for drug tests, and occasionally we'll hear back, well, that person's not driving with us anymore, or they haven't driven in a couple months. So I'm suggesting adding a provision that if a driver doesn't drive for 90 consecutive days, that the license be turned back over to us at that time. And again, Manchester has 60 days, so I'm putting on an additional 30 days. I feel that 3 months without driving is sufficient time to then have the license returned to our office. So these people aren't being randomly selected for drug tests, and then we have to void it out and select someone else, and then if they come back, then they'd have to go for the random drug test. The next change that I have is, right now we have 3 inspections for the vehicles. We have the state inspection, we have a mid-year inspection 6 months after that, and we have a PD inspection. What I'm requesting is that we just remove the PD inspection and just put a little more attention towards the mid-year inspection. So the process right now is the PD inspection scheduled, they can only go, it's only on a Wednesday once a month at the PD. The PD blocks off at a certain time because they have some undercover vehicles and things that they're working on there. So they block off that time. We ran into a situation this past year where there was, I guess, some confusion, and one of the taxi cab companies didn't bring all their cars on that day. So technically now they're not meeting the ordinance. We gave them a break. We said we'll schedule it for the next month, and that next month came, and the car, or multiple cars that needed to go that day, were in a repair shop and couldn't go. So now they've missed 2 months of the PD inspection. We had to then pull them off the road until they could get that completed, and they weren't happy with that process. But we really can't say you missed the PD inspection for 2 months. The city has to do something at that point with it being in the ordinance. But the car was also at an inspection station. So and I've talked with the PD mechanics on this as well. It takes some liability off the city by not bringing the cars to the PD, but they're also still getting that inspection done. I know one of the emails sent to the board was saying that this additional inspection puts a burden on taxi companies. It's currently already in the ordinance that they get a second inspection, a mid-year inspection. So all this is doing is removing the PD inspection and basically giving the city the ability, if we want to attend the inspection, we can go. And this is directly from what Manchester went to a few years ago. They removed their PD inspection and they added some language on the mid-year inspection. So I know there are some concerns on it's an additional burden, but that second mid-year is already happening now. So I'm looking to eliminate the PD inspection, which is basically a third inspection. That makes it's a little more difficult for the taxi companies to get all their cars to the PD, and with their regular inspection and then their mid-year, I think that they're covered enough where these vehicles are seen and they're checked for safety. And let me just see, I believe there's one more minor change in here. Yes, the last minor change is looking just to remove all taxi cabs must be repaired expeditiously as possible and at most within 30 days unless an extension is granted by the city clerk's office. So if one of their taxis gets in an accident, I don't think that we need to be saying, okay, you have to get it repaired in 30 days. They're losing business if that car is not on the road. I would think that they're going to try to get it fixed and back on the road as quickly as possible. I don't think that that's necessary to be in there, that we're saying you should have it repaired in 30 days. So overall, those are the few changes that I'm suggesting. I did email the two companies that we have in town. I briefly went over the process. I let them know what I was proposing. I attached the ordinance. I told them go for first reading, go to personnel, and then it would go back to the alderman. So I did try to make them aware of what I'm looking to have changed. And I know one of the companies did reach out and they had some concerns. So I'd be happy to address any of those if you have any questions too.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, thank you. So, I know, like, so my question is this: what is the state requirement for somebody who wants to be an Uber driver or like driving Lyft?
Yeah, that comes up a lot with our vendors. So our taxi companies in town. We don't have currently, I don't think, any restrictions over Uber or Lyft. I think those are hard to regulate locally.
So if
Alderman
I could
Clemmons, go ahead.
follow up, yeah, I guess I could understand this, but these regulations back in the day before you had things like Lyft, before you had Uber, right? But basically, if somebody wants to be a cab driver, they can do that now. They can get the app and just do it with their car, right? We have all of these regulations where the cab company is much more strictly regulated through the city than somebody who's driving an Uber. And I understand that historically this has been our purview to be able to do that. I just don't know if all of these changes are completely necessary in the sense of, do we even need to really be doing this anymore? I think it makes sense. I think some of this makes sense. But I think some of it is a little bit antiquated. And, for example, the safety inspection, right? If, from the standpoint of the consumer, all cars in the state of New Hampshire, at least unless the legislature changes it, but have to go through a safety inspection. So whether you're driving with a Uber driver or a Lyft driver, or you're driving with one of our cab companies, the car has to be inspected. It has to go through a New Hampshire safety inspection. So if that's good enough for the Uber driver, that should probably be enough for the cab driver. I guess I just have an issue with us over-regulating one segment of an industry and not the other. And I understand that we can't regulate the Uber Lyft, and in fact, I think they are regulated via state law. So my prerogative in this would be to actually go back and see what part of it, instead of changing this, what part of this can we get rid of? Can we eliminate? And I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Mr. Clerk, but I think that some of this is just antiquated, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Do you want to respond?
Yes. So I guess trying to cut back on some of the things that we regulate, I would say at minimum with this ordinance, I would hope that we could at least remove the police inspection from that. So that's cutting back from 3 to 2 inspections. And, I mean, if the aldermen agree, I mean, the mid-year, it seems like Alderman Clements might be in favor of removing the mid-year. That would just be on 300-12, all of Section A. I do want to point out that some of these taxis have been in accidents, and they're not always reported to us. And they're driven, if you think about it, they're driven pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't know, I mean, having someone look at them, a second time in the year might find something that maybe the taxi company isn't aware of. You know, throwing up on the lift and going through it quick, might find something. I mean, I don't really have a preference either way. My main thing would be to definitely remove that PD inspection, but when you're talking about whether one inspection or two inspections, that part, I guess, doesn't really matter too much, in my thoughts, for us.
Oh, sorry. Alderman Jettie, did you have a follow-up, Alderman Clements?
No, I mean, the only other thing I wanted to just briefly point out is that, you know, there are some things that are worth it, like the background check and things like that, because those are things that Lyft and Uber do as well. You know, so those types of things I wouldn't suggest getting rid of, and it makes sense to cover our costs as far as the increase of the fee and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, that's just.
Okay. Alderman Jettie, I had next.
So I just, I can't vouch for the reliability of this information because it's coming from Google. But it, you know, it says that the state of New Hampshire does regulate Uber and Lyft. But I don't think state law allows cities to regulate them. And this says that the state requires Uber and Lyft drivers to pass a background check, and you know, they can't be sex offenders, have committed a felony with a motor vehicle, or been involved in property damage crime, or have a recent DUI conviction. They have meet certain minimum age requirements, and maintain insurance and have a valid registration. You know, I don't think the state regulates taxi drivers or taxi companies. They leave that to the city. So if we don't regulate the taxis, then they're not regulated at all, except for, you know, the requirement that the vehicle be inspected. But, you know, the background checks of the drivers and stuff, I suppose, would be eliminated. But that's something we ought to look into more carefully. You know, my other question is whether or not there are, you know, people who, you know, would pick one of the taxi companies because, you know, they know that they're regulated by the city, that they know that we're making sure that the vehicles are safe and the drivers are, you know, past certain minimums, et cetera. And they may not feel comfortable going to Uber or Lyft because of the lack of regulation. So I think it's something that, you know, requires more thought. I've often wondered why the state doesn't allow us to regulate Uber and Lyft in the same way that we can regulate taxis. But I have another question for you, if I could. I noticed, you know, the current car license fee is $75, which you want to increase to $100. But I noticed that hybrid vehicles are only $1. Was that something we did to incentivize?
I can answer that.
Alderman Clones?
Yes, that was my legislation that I put back in 2011, I think.
Say, but it was
something like
pre-me.
that,
It was,
and
I
it
don't
was-
remember it.
And it was to incentivize the taxi companies to try to use hybrids. Whether or not they ever have or not, I don't know, but that was the idea.
And so I wonder if, if it was that long ago, maybe we ought to review that, make sure that that's, that is accomplishing I think incentivizing, anything we can do to incentivize people to get away from burning fossil fuels is a good thing. Whether or not $1 is the appropriate thing right now, I don't know, do we have any hybrids?
We do not. And over the last few years, the amount of taxis we actually have operating in the city has been decreasing. The drivers have been decreasing. I started just probably 2.5 years ago. We had 3 taxi companies. We're down to 2 right now. And one of them only has 1 driver. And so in the drivers, the chauffeur licenses have been decreasing over the last few years. So I do think more people are probably utilizing Uber and Lyft over the taxis, it seems like, or they're just having difficulty recruiting people to drive, but the numbers have gone down.
Okay. And could I ask another question? So the, my other question is, the current legislation that's working its way through the legislature, where they're talking about doing away with vehicle inspections, does that apply to, would that apply to taxis, or are taxis in a different, is what the legislature's trying to do is just apply to non-commercial passenger vehicles, or do you know, and how would that affect this?
I think if we have it in the ordinance that we need an inspection, that they would most likely still be required to get one. I'm not sure how that would actually play out. I think if inspections went away entirely, I think I'd refer to the legal department to kind of give an overview on how that impacts our ordinance. But I think if it's in the ordinance that they need to have the car inspected, I think that it probably would still be required unless they had a different opinion.
Yeah, except the ordinance says, the ordinance assumes they're getting a state inspection, and then the ordinance asks them to get 6 months later to get another inspection. So if the current legislation is going to do away with the state inspection, and that applies to taxi cabs, then we ought to look at our language to make sure that our inspection isn't tied to the state inspection, or the timing of the state inspection, I would think.
Yeah.
Because if you say you need a second inspection 6 months after the state inspection, and there is no state inspection,
In the second.
then you're not going to. So I don't know where that leaves us. Do you want to go back and work on this, or?
Well, I would say it's already currently in the ordinance that way because of the state law having the state inspection. My opinion would be if the state law changed, then I think we'd revisit that portion of the ordinance if we were to keep the inspections in there. There are a lot of bills that legislatures propose and then they end up not really going anywhere. So I guess I wouldn't want to change something now just based off of if it could happen. I think that would be a relatively minor change to the ordinance if the law changed. But again, I would be open to whatever the board wanted to do regarding the 2 or 3 inspections that we currently have.
Okay.
Alderman Lopez?
So one of the cab companies that reached out is obviously located in my ward because we're in the middle of Nashua, so that's where it's easiest to dispatch to and from. So I had a lot of questions. I have pretty far down in the speaker order, so I think most of them have been addressed. But I did want to ask City Clerk Healy, particularly the 90-day, if their license hasn't, the driver hasn't driven in 90 days. One of the concerns that was raised in the email was they're just removing it without asking why they were out for 90 days might not necessarily be fair. The purpose of removing it is partly so that they'll actually tell you instead of having you just find out when you reach out. So could we modify that, or would you be open to us modifying that to say the cab company needs to advise the city clerks in some form that a person's not driving at, say, 30 days and then ask for an extension as of 60 days?
Yeah, I would be open to that. Part of the reason I want that in there is for our tracking purposes. So quarterly, we do drug tests, and we don't like reaching out to these people to say, okay, you need to do a drug test before you can get back on the road, and they say, well, I haven't driven in 4 months. I don't know when I'm coming back. So it would be nice if we were kind of just at least in the loop on when a driver is out. Luckily, over the past few years, we haven't had anyone fail a random drug test, but in the past, I've seen some letters from prior to my years in Nashua where someone's failed a mid-year or a quarterly drug test, and then they have to come off the road. So we want to keep that system in place, but we don't really like, we send out this random pool and say 2 of them are not actually active drivers at the moment. So I would be amenable to updating that to just notifying the clerk's office of, you know, any like prolonged absences or something. So that we're not selecting them, we're removing them from the pool of applicants that are selected for random drug testing.
As a point of clarification, do they provide any proof that they haven't been driving? Or is this a great way for someone who knows they might not pass the test to be like, oh, well, me, I'm not, no.
Well, part of the ordinance, not something I'm looking to change, but the city clerk or law enforcement are able to inspect the logs. So if for some reason you suspect someone's driving that we're told is not, law enforcement or city clerk could go and request to actually look at that. We haven't done that. We've really had no reason to go and do that, but if we think someone's driving that they say he's not driving, that is kind of a recourse that we could go and look.
And that's probably one aspect I'd want to amend with the committee's support, is to basically amend that section to require the cab company to tell the city clerk if a driver isn't driving for more than 30 days. That way, if we do an inspection, or we do pull a name, we can say, oh, that's not an active one. They don't necessarily have to say that they've resumed. Would that make a difference?
It would be helpful if they told us that they were resumed as well. The licenses only go for a year, so they might not renew the next year, and then they would fall off the roster anyway. But if they're planning on coming back and it's still, you know, like earlier in the year, it'd probably be helpful for us to know that they're back driving.
To Alderman Clemens, through the chair, do you intend to amend anything tonight? Do you want to put this on the table and then visit it?
No, I mean, well, I'm not ready for it to move forward, if that's what you're asking, but I think it could use some work. But I don't have any amendments prepared, because I had more questions tonight than I did, you know, and I think listening to some of the other conversation here, I think it's been helpful, and some good points have been brought up, so I'd like to take a look at it and then bring something back maybe at the next meeting.
Okay, then I will not make an amendment, because why make more work for legal? We can just do it all at once.
So do I have a motion? Motion before us is for final passage.
I don't want to move to table unless someone else had a question, but I would if.
I have a question before we table it, if we untable it. So I'm looking at the ordinance to Mr. Healy through the chair. And, well, first of all, you mentioned logs, going to look at logs. Is there a requirement that they maintain logs?
I believe there is a requirement that they shall have a log of all their rides, and I would have to have that part of the ordinance in front of me, but I believe it is in the ordinance that they need to maintain their logs.
Okay. And the ordinance also talks about every vehicle used as a taxi cab shall be maintained consistent with the vehicle's original intended appearance, clean and sanitary at all times, seats that are intact and not torn or ripped. Drivers shall be courteous to the public, clean and neat in appearance, etc. How are these things enforced?
Philosophically?
No, so actually, the taxis are brought to City Hall once a year, and I actually go and I sit in the taxis and I check the windows and everything out in the parking lot. So I sit in the taxis, I make sure that the windows go down, that the door is open. We're not checking them daily, but
Is that in the ordinance?
Is that in your job description?
so, but part of that is for safety, so customers, the windows work, the doors open, so they're able to get out. And that's when we do notice some things on the car. The car might be dented a little bit and they didn't, let us know that they were in an accident or something, but we're not super strict on that. And usually if the window doesn't go down, they know about it, they're getting the motor or whatever to replace it. But once a year, they bring their cars here, and I think it's part of one of their inspections. But it's relatively quick. It's like 2 or 3 minutes per car. I sit in the back seat and I check the windows and the doors, and then they're on their way.
I think these are good things. I think,
Yeah.
I remember, I don't know if they still do it, but, London was known for the quality of its taxi cabs and the taxi cab drivers, and, people would talk about how when you get into a London cab, you felt secure. You knew that the cab driver knew where he was going and that he was going to go there as efficiently as possible. And I think these are good things, and I think that I'm not against regulating taxi cabs. I think they should be regulated. I was just curious as to how we're doing it, and I suppose a lot of it is like most things in this city, and probably most cities, it's complaint driven. We don't know people are violating the law until somebody complains about it, and then we react. I know in code enforcement, that's the way things work, and we just don't have the personnel to enforce the laws the way that we maybe should. But thank you for answering my questions.
Could I just add one more thing? On the original ordinance proposal, I had an effective date for the beginning of the taxi licensing year, starting May 1st, 2025. So if this does go to a vote, that would just have to probably be changed to upon passage. So depending on when it's passed, I mean, someone that if you do pass it with some of the increases, we would have a different price, say at the beginning of the year, and then if you passed it, say 2 months later, anyone that comes in, it would just be a little bit different. But that would have to be one of the amendments is upon passage.
Okay. The motion before us is for final passage. Alderman Clemmons.
Motion to table.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion will go on the table. Thank you.
Is that cab inspection going to be on the Citizens Academy?
Maybe. Tabled in committee.
Let's see, is it the right one? Yes, it is. All right. Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to remove from the table O25-046.
For the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Sorry,
It was a little comedic. I agree.
I was clerking.
All right.
So
Do I have a
now,
second motion?
so now we have O25-046, providing information on the tax bill about property revaluations and providing for future notifications of upcoming citywide revaluations. I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
The motion, discussion. Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee for holding on to this for a time I could be here. I know it's been tabled for a little bit, and hopefully we are able to get this through tonight. But what you have before you in 046 is kind of a dual-pronged approach that myself and Director Cummings came up with after the last reevaluations went out, and some people knew, some people didn't. This kind of sorts out that communication and streamlines further notifications. So what would happen, the first part of it would be each municipal tax bill will contain the following language, which is New Hampshire RSA 75AA provides that the assessor shall reappraise all real estate within the municipality, so the assessments are full and true value at least as often as every 5th year. Due to volatility, the city is planning to do a property reevaluation every 2 years. The current plan is the reevaluation will occur in even number of years. That was agreed upon language between legal and myself. We kind of went back and forth for some time on that language, and finally we're able to smooth out kind of the particulars. We wanted it to be something that didn't have to be changed often, and we wanted it to be something that was somewhat informative. With that language, though, I still found that I think we could do better, and the main chunk of this legislation that I wanted to do was was more of the notification that would happen before. So this would also add in language saying, beginning in 2026, the city shall provide owners of record with notice of a citywide reevaluation per RSA 75AA by U.S. postal mail on or before April 15th of a reevaluation year. Said notice shall be provide a phone number for questions to be answered if they have any at that point, which they really shouldn't, other than why are we reevaluating. So with that, I will open it up to committee discussion. It's pretty straightforward, the text, but leave it at
So,
Alderman Jettie.
so through you to Alderman Gouveia, I noticed in reviewing legislation that's currently before the legislature, I think I saw something that was sponsored by Senator Avard, similar to this. Are you familiar with that?
I am aware of a piece of legislation that has to do with notice of a reevaluation. If I recall correctly, it does not go this far. That was more of, I think it had to be posted out on like where we would put our meeting notices down at the entry of City Hall. So this goes even one step further than that. If I recall correctly, please don't quote me on that.
Okay, so, so to your knowledge, this wouldn't conflict with whatever that's doing?
No, it would work hand in hand with it, would be my opinion.
Okay. And I have another question. So
Alderman Jettie.
the,
Raising your hand or playing through?
the first, 5-113, paragraph B, The first part of your proposal.
Yep.
This is language that would be printed on the tax bill.
Yep.
So there'd be no real major expense with that. It just goes out with the tax bill, correct?
That would be correct. This would be, it would be printed on, I believe, the back side of the tax bill? Yeah, so the back side of the tax bill. I would have liked it to be the front. I understand we can only put so much on the front side of a tax bill, hence why I also wanted to add that extra section in. Was just another bite, because I truly am not sure how many people thoroughly read the back side of a tax bill.
Okay. So, so then, 5-40, paragraph F, in which you're adding there saying that the city shall provide owners of record with notice of any citywide revaluations per RSA 75:8-A. And that's 75:8-A, that just says that the city has to reevaluate every 5 years? Is that what that is?
Yes. To my understanding, yes, that would be correct.
Okay. And so by U.S. postal mail on or before April 15th of any revaluation year. So this would be an additional and separate mailing. And do you know how much that would cost?
Yeah, so it was, the fiscal note on it was somewhere between 25 and 50,000. I think that's kind of a big price range if you ask me. I think it's kind of near the lesser side of that personally. But what we would do, and the intention would be, this wouldn't be something we do inside a city hall. There would be no city hall employees. This would be rolled into our current contract with Vision. So it would be an addendum to that contract. And I know even without this legislation's in discussion with Director Cummings, this was something that was going to be looked at being put in the contract elsewise. This would just also put it in ordinance.
Okay, so it's your understanding that whoever does the revaluation, part of their contract would require them to notify the owners of record, and we'd have to, that would increase the cost of the contract, I suppose, but that would be part of the contract.
Yes, I would not intend for this to be done inner city unless we found it to be beneficial, which I'm not really sure we would find that beneficial at all. And it would probably be much easier than just to just add into the contract that we have with Vision currently, or any other contractor we might use in the future.
Questions or comments from other committee members? Alderman Clements.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this would only go out in the years that we were doing the reevaluation, so it'd be every other year, correct?
That is correct. So yeah, it would be April 15th or before of the reevaluation year.
Yeah, okay.
And if I can add as well, Madam Chair.
Alderman
So
Gale.
we did look at other ways of getting this notification out. And every way that we found wouldn't make it to everybody. So you can look at water bills. Well, people who live in condos and associations don't get their water bills. It's just one big water bill. So are we just gonna notify people who physically own land, or are we gonna notify everybody? And in my opinion, it was worth notifying everybody, as reevaluations would affect both condo owners like I am, people who live in associations, whatever it might be. So this was just kind of the best option to get the job done, in my opinion, and really put this issue to bed so nobody can ever say they were not told again.
Alderman Jettie.
So, recalling the last reevaluation, I kind of recall getting a letter from the reevaluation company saying they were doing this and inviting you to make an appointment for them to come, or to contact them and inviting you to meet with them. And so would this be in addition to that, or is this, would this notice include whatever, however they're communicating with us about the revaluation. Because, I mean, I understand what you're trying to do, and that's to notify people that this is going on. But my memory is that, we knew it was going on. What surprised us was when it was done, and all of a sudden we got a letter saying, here's your number. I mean, I think that was the surprise, that, that we didn't know that letter was coming. We knew the revaluation was occurring, because we all did get, back then they were doing, it wasn't statistical, it was coming to
Measuring
visit
list,
you.
yeah.
So we were all aware that this was happening. It's just that when it was done, like we aldermen weren't told, Vision has finished their job and their letters will be going out soon, so that we could, warn people. The letters just came out of nowhere. Is my memory. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's my memory. So, I just want to make sure that that we're not doing something that really doesn't accomplish anything. I just want to make sure that it's doing what we hope it does. And, maybe you could speak to that.
Sure, and I would mean anytime we can get a notification in front of a resident about what's happening, I think that's a positive step for the city. I do know what you're saying. I personally don't remember getting anything from Vision, a letter saying they were reevaluating. I have heard people who have said who remember getting them, and I've heard people who don't remember getting them. So I've kind of heard both sides here. I'm not, if Director Cummings has anything to add to that, but I would still say this is a worthwhile venture, in my opinion.
If I may, Madam Chair?
I suppose.
I think both recollections are accurate. I think one of the stumbling blocks is the letter actually wasn't very clear that it was a City of Nashua sponsored endeavor, if you will. It kind of looked more like a piece of junk mail, or not as important, didn't have the import maybe that you'd take it because there wasn't a city seal on the envelope or anything of that nature. So I think, yes, to your point, Alderman Jettie, people weren't notified via a letter. To Alderman Gouvea's point, I don't know if everyone really paid attention to it. They may have missed it because it didn't carry maybe the weight that it should have. Nonetheless, the notification that is being discussed right now would be in addition to the efforts that are made a little bit further along in the process. The notification that this ordinance is speaking to would be at the onset of the revaluation, and then there would be additional communications that followed on after. And so I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you.
Alderman Senate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and don't sit down just yet. This might be a good question for you. Through you too, Director Cummings, if I could. So you had just touched upon, I think, what is my biggest recollection about what the big issue was with the last notification, the revaluation, which is that folks received a letter of notification in the mail from Vision Government Solutions, looked at the envelope, said, oh, I don't know who that is, and it went in the junk mail pile. My first one probably went there. If this is going to be an addendum to our contract with Vision, and Vision is going to manage that, how do we avoid this additional notification landing in the junk mail pile of our residents versus maybe handling it in-house?
Director Cummings?
Thank you. So I don't know if we will achieve the goal that you're suggesting, and that's probably something that we need to discuss further, because this type of notification, what was priced out, was for a postcard. So I want to be clear, this notification is going to be a postcard. I think we could develop some standard stock language. I think we could probably put some images on it But nonetheless, it is going to be the intention of it, if we were to enact this piece of legislation, is for it to be an oversized postcard that would be in people's mail. And so that's what would get their attention. Much beyond that, we haven't developed the copy on. Obviously, we know we'll need to provide a phone number. But that's really as far as we've got. So could it end up in the junk mail? Yes, it could. And does that defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do? I think that's a fair question to be had, but I just want folks to know what we are endeavoring to do, what was priced out, because if you're looking to do something different, then I do want you to be aware of the fact that the fiscal impact may be different. We priced out really the most efficient economical price, and that didn't include an envelope.
No, and to that point, that actually sounds like the more effective approach, is to not put something sealed in an envelope from an outside organization that, you know, more than half of our residents aren't going to recognize. I do think this is a worthwhile endeavor. I supported it as a sponsor, and I would just caution us and be really insistent that as those discussions are happening to put together that copy, that every possible avenue to ensure that folks know that this is coming in conjunction with the city of Nashua, so that they know that this does affect them. This is not something they've been signed up for, you know, other than by proxy of living in the city of Nashua.
Alderman Lopez.
I would be willing to support, with, if the committee is willing, an amendment to specifically identify Director Cummings' face on it.
Oh my,
think
wow,
people wouldn't
that's
know
where we're
it.
going.
I was thinking of the local ward alderman.
I think
Oh,
Director Cummings is a better
perfect.
idea.
Oh, we get out of it then. All right,
Let's agree on Mayor Donches.
wow, okay. So Tyler, I know when you brought this forward, you came to me and talked to me a bit about this. I think that a lot of the things that have been said so far have been I think the intent of it is great, that people were surprised. And I was really happy to hear that you were able to get it on the tax bill. I'm struggling with paying extra to put a notification in the mail as on top of that, because to some of the points that have been made, it wasn't about the fact that there was going to be a eval, it was how much the eval was, right? Because if you're on a fixed income and you're looking at your tax bill and now it's 20% more, that's really hard to just like absorb in a month or two. So I'm concerned that we're kind of overcorrecting and it's not really going to fix the problem. But the intent of having these every 2 years was so that that number didn't keep going up at whatever the insane balloon rate was. So my preference would be that we keep it on the tax bill and not do the additional $50,000 every 2 years. That's the high number there, but that's just my personal thought. I also have a ton of experience in direct mail, so I literally what I did for the first 10 years of my career. So I understand the sort of blind envelope throwaway type thing, but those are my concerns, and I do get concerned about, while I appreciate and always want people to be informed, if we start notifying this, then what other things are going to come up is also we have to send all these notifications, and what does that look like from a perspective of budget? Alderman Clemmons, I saw your hand.
Yeah, no, because, you know, I'm co-sponsor of this, and I agree with the concept around it. And one of the things that that I had spoken to the sponsor about was the cost of the extra postcard, and that was a concern to me. And I guess my question is if the language that's on the actual tax bill itself, so everyone gets 2 tax bills, right? Is that going to be on both of them?
Yeah, it would be on every tax bill. Yes, it would be on the back of every tax bill.
So to Alderman Kelly's point, I mean, it's actually going to be notified everybody twice, really.
Yep.
I don't know that there's a need for the postcard, to be honest with you. I would be amenable to amending this to eliminate the postcard part of it, because we have the language on the on the tax bill itself, and basically saying that, you know, we're going to do this every 2 years, it's gonna be in an even number year, and they get that notice twice. So, I mean, it just saves us a cost, right? And that's kind of where I'm looking at it. It's not that I don't, if the postcard was free, I'd be absolutely, yeah, 100%, let's do it, right? So I don't know, I'm debating that in my head.
I would support that. Alderman Govea, what do you think?
Yeah, I still think the thing I like about the postcard is it's not in an envelope. I like the fact that you would be able to see it even if you're scanning through your mail from your mailbox to your kitchen table. You might at least pan past it once. It would be my understanding that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but there would be a city seal on this, which I think would definitely look better than a Vision Solutions logo on it. So I think anytime anybody gets anything with a city seal on it, it pops out more. You don't really hear about people not receiving a tax bill or passing through a tax bill on accident. I think when they see City of Nashua on it, it tends to raise a flag a little bit more. That would be kind of my intentions on it. And I do understand there is a cost to it, but it's every 2 years. And I think this is minimal compared to what we're paying Vision is a overall contract. Do you have what is the Vision contract at right now? If you remember off the top of your head, the value of it.
Oh, yes, I do. It is $430,000.
Can we reassess that?
So it would be closer to 500,000 with this.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit higher, but yeah, that's right.
Round it up.
So we could get the contract under 400 if we eliminated this postcard.
All right, motion before us is recommending final passage.
Can we just clarify that? I want to make sure everyone understands. The existing contract right now is $430,000. If we were to add in this notification, it would be on top of that, whatever that dollar amount may be.
Right.
It would go up.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me.
The motion in front of us is to recommend final passage. Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a motion to amend by eliminating the second part of this, the 5113. Excuse me, I got it mixed up. To eliminate paragraph 2 of the proposed ordinance, which is the part dealing with section 5-40, paragraph F, in adding, beginning in 2026, the thing about the postcard. So my motion would be to eliminate that.
Does everyone
to
understand
amend
that?
by eliminating that.
Everyone understand the motion?
Eliminating the underlined,
Yes,
Yep.
okay.
yeah.
Does everyone understand? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The ayes have it. We need another motion then. Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, motion for final passage as amended.
In front of us is to recommend final passage as amended. All those in favor?
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
I'd like
We
to-
actually,
I'd
we
like
can
to
have a
speak- yeah,
discussion.
I'm
Sorry.
I'd like to speak.
We can discuss
So-
that.
So, I obviously, this isn't gonna happen well, I guess it would. Yeah, this would happen
I'm not.
this would happen, yeah, with this July's and
Correct.
December's tax bill. So what I think a good thing to do would be, especially because we're in an odd year, right? Why don't we do this and assess and see, talk to your constituents. Hey, did you notice the second part of the back of the tax bill? or we'll hear from them, right? And if we think by December, hey, you know what, this really did it, great. If not, we can address it again come next year and say, maybe the postcard, we can revisit that. But this at least gives us a chance to try it this way. It won't increase the cost. And we can do the postcard next year, which will be the reevaluation, which will be the reval year. And, so I think this is kind of like a baby steps. And maybe this will solve the problem. If not, we can relook at it. But I think at least I will say to the sponsor, you've done a great job. A lot of hard work put into this. I appreciate it. I think it's a good solution to what was a problem. And so I'm happy to support this as amended, and I'm also happy to look at it again with the postcard portion of it if we think a year from now that that's something that we need to revisit.
You said something, Alderman Clemens, that I also was playing around in my head. You might actually see it 3 times, depending on when you do revaluation, because you get 2 tax bills a year, and then you get.
Right, yes.
So so you might actually see it 3 times before the evaluation happens.
Mm-hmm.
Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, I just want to comment. It occurred to me just before we were voting that there could be somebody who is unlucky enough to buy their house after the taxes have been paid on it and then be like, wait, now the value goes up and my taxes are higher. So that's why I was kind of thinking, all right, well, at least we put a letter out, a postcard out. But on the other hand, $50,000 is like a teacher, so.
Okay. Motion before us is to recommend final passage as amended. Oh, sorry. Sorry, it was so quiet. Go
Thank
ahead,
you, Madam
Alderman
Chair.
Correa.
Yeah, I think half of this is fine. I'm willing to retake it. I mean, it gives me a little hope that we're sweating out $50,000 purchases in this chamber. I look forward to budget season. I think this is great. Let's start cutting more $50,000 purchases while we're at it. So yeah, I mean, let's just take it one step at a time. But I'll probably on the floor vote no on the amendment, but I will vote yes on the final passage, and we'll take it from there.
And Alderman Correa, I want to, echo some of the comments. You've been working really hard on this, and I appreciate your willingness to talk to people to figure out if you could even legally put it on the tax bill. So I
That was
really
half the battle right there, is to figure out what we can and
Right.
can't
You did
put
a
it
lot
on.
of work, so I really want to just commend you for that, because it was, a constituent concern that came up, and you took the time to do it. So thank you.
No
All right. Recommending final passage as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. We are leaving 051 on the table. Board of Health has yet to make a recommendation, and Alderman Moran asked us to keep it on the table. Public comment. There is nobody from the public here. General discussion. Any general discussion? Would any alderman like to make remarks? Okay, do I have a motion? Alderman Clemens.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And we are adjourned at 9:38. Thank you, everyone.